So welcome again, and today's webinar we're going to talk about what are these hiring processes and hiring tips that we should know as we're going through hyper growth. And the companies that are here today are Oyster, Hoffi, and Jeeves, as well as SafetyWing. And we will introduce to you guys who we are and why are we here in front of you. First off, my name is Lana. I am the head of revenue at SafetyWing. I'm also a Y Combinator founder and an advisor to a few different startups. I love working remotely. I built teams remotely. Last year, I built our B2B sales team from 0 to 14 people and a few million in revenue. Now I am building out the partnerships team. Our company, SafetyWing, went from maybe 20 people when I joined about a year and a half ago to maybe 120 now. We're going to double this year again and probably double again after that. So we're growing extremely fast. Therefore, we think that we have hopefully figured out a couple things about hiring that I'd love to share with you guys. In terms of who is SafetyWing, we are a global benefits kind of like social safety net. We offer these benefits to remote workers, nomads, distributed companies, global companies. Think about those of you that are hiring in different countries all over the world, and you need to cover your employees with these benefits. For example, remote health, which we started with, as well as nomad insurance. We're going to add remote doctor, remote retirement, life and disability, and then remote therapy, parental leave, income protection to round out that global benefits package that you can give to your employees and contractors. So we can go to the next slide. Today's agenda, we are going to start with a poll. This is just a really fun poll to understand the makeup of the group. Feel free to answer this. Then we'll go into the panel discussion, and then we'll leave room for the Q&A at the end. So maybe without wasting too much time, Charles, who is helping me with the webinar, can launch the poll, and here it is. You can choose and click submit. And I can see already that the majority of us are in 3 or more countries, which is great. And then maybe 30%, 35, 40. Okay, great. So yeah, the majority is in 3 or more countries, and the others are in 2 countries, and some do want to become borderless in the future, which is perfect, and only 8% say that they do not want to be borderless, which is fine as well. We love having kind of like a group of different ideas and thoughts here. Okay. Great. So the next slide. Oh, great. Now we get to introduce the panelists. So I'll have Bruno turn on his camera first and introduce himself, as well as Oyster. Bruno, welcome.
Hey, everyone. Thank you. So, hey, everyone. Glad to be here. So I was the first partnerships hire at Oyster a year ago. I joined, we were about 40 people. We're now almost 500. So huge hypergrowth in the last year. I was the first partnerships hire. We now have a team of 9 as well. And we are a distributed HR platform that enables companies to employ people anywhere in the world.
Very cool. Thank you, Bruno. I've known Bruno for over a year, and it's been a great kind of like fun partnerships team that we have built. So really great to have you here, Bruno. Next, I'll have Maria from Hoffi introduce herself, and please turn on your camera.
Hi there, so I'm Maria. I'm the head of talent at Hoffi. Hoffi is a solution to the physical layer of remote and distributed work. Basically just making sure that we equip people wherever they are so they can do their best work. In terms of my background, I have been dealing with recruitment and talent predominantly for a number of years, especially over the last couple of years. I've been dealing with hypergrowth, doubling, tripling headcount, starting from Twitch and then moving into startups as well. So.
Oh, cool. You're at Twitch, Justin Kahn's company. Awesome. Katie, please introduce yourself and welcome. Welcome, Maria.
Hi, Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Katie Ray. So I'm the Chief People Officer at Jeeves, which is a global payments platform. And really exciting today, we announced our Series C. We're at 2.1 billion, so we're a little double unicorn. Yeah, so exciting. That's why I'm here in New York today. So just quickly about my background, I started my career at Deloitte consulting company. And then I moved to Facebook, which was, I believe it was Series D when I joined. So it was a bit of a startup, and then stayed there through the IPO. And then I spent a long time of my career at Netflix as an HR VP. And now I'm at Jeeves. So, yep, lots of growth at all those companies, different stages. Jeeves today has about 150 employees. And when I joined about 7 months ago, it was like 30. So that's a growth.
That's amazing, Katie. You have such a great wide experience, starting with Facebook at Series D. I remember those days. Like, what year was that? Maybe 2011?
2010 was when I joined. Yeah, and I was talking to some colleagues earlier. The first office was not pretty. It was a horrible office in Palo Alto. And then we moved to Menlo Park, which turned into Disneyland. So it was exciting. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've been there. I remember, meeting Sheryl Sandberg like in 2011, and you guys were just about to go IPO, and that was really, really exciting. Very cool. This is exciting. Thanks, guys, for joining us. I'm really, happy that you took the time, and let's get into some really interesting questions. Charles, what is next on our? Oh, cool. So we have one more poll question. This way we can understand how many people do you guys have in your companies. Click a number and then submit, and we'll take that in consideration as we're answering these questions, because we have a good group here with different experiences from small to big companies. Okay, so the majority seems like 10 to 200 employees, and about 16% is 200 to 1,000. Okay, so we're in that like early, mid stage, and then higher 10%, 25%, more than 200. Great. Okay, Charles, do we have any more poll questions, or we keep going?
Yep, we've got one more here. Launch it.
One more, guys. Okay, last one before we start the conversation. What phase of growth is your company currently experiencing? Just select one of the following. In a growth phase now, 60%. And then 10%, 5% is post-growth, and none of these apply. Okay, cool. All right, so great. So a lot of you are in this growth phase, which, it shows here in a growth phase, which we should take into consideration as we're talking about this. Okay, so let's start the panel discussion. I'd love to kind of hear from you guys in terms of establishing a foundation for the hiring process. What are some steps and maybe some processes that you have found helpful to grow from, let's say, 50 to 200, and then obviously 200 to 1,000 if you have that experience. If any of you want to go first, please go for it.
I can certainly go first. So from my experience, I probably have a little bit more on the up to 200, bringing that on board. I think the first thing that it has to start with, whether it be part of a large team or if it's a brand new startup, you have to start, of course, spend, I would say, 10-15% more than you might think on planning. Like, estimate that you need 2 days for planning, book in 2.5 days for planning. That's the way that I usually like to think about it. And it's always about creating a balance of the kind of roles, what exactly you're going to need to grow, and making a distinction between hiring to create growth versus hiring to respond to growth, which is kind of like sales roles, for example, are very obvious in terms of hiring to create for growth, whilst on the other hand, something like product and engineering will need to respond to that growth. So you don't want the seesaw to get too high one way or the other way.
Yeah, I can piggyback off that too, because I think the headcount planning process every company I've worked at, it's been difficult. Even Netflix, which is very, very mature of a company. So I would say, get yourself a plan for a year. It's really hard for hiring managers to look that far out, especially when if you're a smaller company growing very quickly, but it's a good exercise. So just ask them, it's going to be a guess, and 6 months in you can check in and change things. But also I try to do a combination of top down and bottom up, because if you do only bottoms up, you might end up with way too much headcount that you possibly can't do. And so starting tops up, thinking what are the company goals, and if there's any metrics you can come up with. So for example, a salesperson can onboard X amount of companies, a recruiter can hire typically 30 roles in a year. So if you can come up with metrics for all of your roles, that's going to help you with the headcount plan, and then get yourself that year out. And then what I do is quarterly, I check in to see how we're doing with number of roles hired and budget also that you spent. So that plan for a year will give you a little bit of guidance, and then it doesn't get Wild West where everyone's just opening roles out of control.
Yeah, I guess like on my end, to add a little bit to Katie's point, was a bit as well to understand the process behind the headcount, which is always very important, and you can never hit it quite right. I feel like working with our HR team is always a bit tricky to work on it, but establishing from the get-go a clear hiring process, clear guidelines as well, working on your values and the mission of the company even before that, so we'll know that when we go for the hires, we're all on the same page. I think that helped quite a lot, because obviously I joined right when we were starting the hypergrowth stage, and it was kind of like understanding the cultural fit as well above the talent was also quite important, because this way it gave us a guideline, because a lot of people were involved in the process that were not going to work with that person directly, right? Because teams are growing so quickly, like the partnerships team was on one person. I had to bring other people from the company involved in helping hire. I did the same on other areas, and so bringing those things together and make sure that everyone is on the same page, I think is quite important from the get-go.
That's great. Actually, I want to piggyback on that, Bruno, where I was reading that it's the job of the entire company, especially sub-management. About 5% of their time should be spent recruiting other people. And when it comes to management, it should be about 50%, which is huge. Basically, as you're going through this hypergrowth stage, your main job as managing anything that you are should be to hire and attract the right people to your team and spend time looking for those right people. And actually, I had written down here, one was define your company's headcount, like you guys said. The second was your compensation philosophy. This is something really interesting, because a lot of, I guess, companies will start out and have all kinds of compensation plans all over the place, and that leaves room for the people that are better at negotiating, getting higher salaries, and some people not being so happy. So at SafetyWing, we thought about that from day one, and that's been really easy to kind of like go to every candidate and say, hey, this is how we pay. We pay a flat salary. If you're in a revenue position, you do get bonus, and this is what that looks like. So having a very clear, I think, compensation strategy also will pay benefits or in the future. What do you guys think about that?
It's getting a little bit. It is getting a little bit more challenging to slightly kind of create a uniform, because of course, especially if you're looking to hire across multiple countries, I've been in many kind of discussions where people are like, oh, maybe we should pay the same all the way throughout. When it's in the same country, like for example, in the US, there's been a lot of companies that are looking to kind of pay the same regardless of location and bring people up or down, not necessarily kind of adjust per location, but when you kind of bring it to the global foray, it gets a little bit more difficult to justify, kind of rewarding people in countries with lower costs of living rather than, and almost like penalizing people that maybe can't move out of, for example, I'm in London, I cannot move out of London for the foreseeable future. Does that mean that somebody else is getting rewarded if they have the opportunity to live in a lower cost of living country? So it's about kind of having, especially when you turn global, I think probably like the best way, the way that I've created kind of the compensation philosophy is aiming for a percentile a lot of research has to go into almost every single hire that you're having to create, especially if it's in a location that you've never really hired in before, and then trying to kind of be competitive for at least the way that I created is for the local market. But when it comes to budgeting, always budget as if you're hiring in the most expensive location, really.
Yeah, comp is so hard. Like that's probably, in my opinion, it's probably one of the hardest parts of my role, because it is just like what you were saying. It is so specific for each role, especially when you're hiring globally. We can hire this role and it really can sit anywhere, and we think more about time zone friendliness. But when I'll share a couple tips because I spent a long time researching these things, but option impact is a good source for very small companies that are pre-public, because it has a lot of great stock, like option information on what percentage you should give, and also like the dollar value. So I found that very helpful. Now that we're getting larger, we're going to move to Radford, which is really, in my opinion, the gold standard of compensation data. But we also use 3 things, so we're consistent with each role that we're hiring. So it's the actual role, the location of the role, and then the person's experience. So using those 3 things to come up with that number and using the data that we have helps. But every single role is a research project in itself, and it is not scalable. And I don't have a better solution for that. So eventually that will probably be one person's job.
That's awesome. And okay, that's interesting. So, that could be an interesting topic where it's going to be a person's job. How do you guys think about making, I guess, hiring a role where it could be a team that could help kind of like solve this problem? Is it like a team of like 1 that goes into like 10? How have you seen it in companies, and how does that play out?
Usually yeah, go on, Katie.
You go first. You go. I'm talking a lot.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, from my side, usually, eventually, as you're growing, kind of your whole HR team will need to start, dividing into centers of excellence, as it's known, and from there on, going into like, specifically total reward is probably like the best way to put it, because if you just start subdividing in like compensation, et cetera, it can get a little bit too much. But then as you're growing, and as again, let's say that if you're hiring, it's a completely different ball game if you're hiring 5 people a month versus 20 people a month versus like 100 people a month. At that point, you probably will need like an analyst, basically, of some kind under the total compensation. So that's kind of how I've arranged it previously, where it's literally one person's job to kind of analyze. They can get involved in some side projects and things like that to kind of keep it a little bit more fresh than just literally going into like kind of like the compensation research, cost of living research, things like that, competitiveness. But in general, I think an analyst should be able to do that, because there's more and more tools cropping up out there. Even something is as simple as just going on something like Numbeo and Expatistan, where you can actually compare cost of living between 2 different locations, and just gives you like an index that you can start as a working point and then go from there. That like there's more and more tools being created.
Yeah, just to add to that, with Oyster, it was a bit like that as well. We just had like a bunch of tools and a bunch of things to work on, and just we kind of break it down a little bit, as Katie said, like experience, location, and role in a lot of ways, but still it's never perfect, right? And before we had like a compensation policy for a long time, and now that we have a chief people officer in place as well, Mark Frame is doing an amazing job. He's doing like a compensation philosophy actually. And so putting thought behind on how to build this philosophy behind it. And so it's a lot of aggregated data from different indexes, option impact as well. So some of the tools that Katie and Maria has mentioned, and also a lot of like feeling on the industry, right? And figuring out percentiles and everything. Super complicated right now. We're almost 500 people in 60+ countries. So it's always hard to keep everyone happy at all times. And also like having ideas on how to adjust it if that person moves location, if they go to a higher cost of living place, or moving to a different one with a higher cost. It's very complicated to do it. And just building a philosophy behind the policy, I think is going to help quite a lot, because at least it's going to give us a North Star. But I mean, we can't be afraid to change it and iterate on it and improve it, because I don't feel like it's always going to be perfect for everyone.
Agreed. And no one knows what will be, I guess, play out to be the best structure or philosophy. Is it the flex structure or location-based? We discussed this at length last month in another webinar where we had like, a few hundred people on there that were so interested, asking many questions. We didn't really get to something that was, okay, this is the way to go, because right now a lot of things are in flux. People are working remotely. They're in Costa Rica like you are. I am in Mexico, but I'm based in the US. Do you pay me less if I go to Mexico? You know, what happens there. So as the world continues to open up and have this hybrid model, maybe more and more remote people will be out there. Hopefully there will be some way that will make our jobs easier. That way it's a bit more standardized versus having to do so much research and having an analyst for every single hire, because if you have to go to 500 count, that's a lot of work that everyone, you know, has to do. Speaking of that, this is so interesting to me. When you guys are hiring and there's a ton of people at the top of the funnel, have you in your companies put down like the hiring funnel? Is there like such a thing like the sales funnel, for example, who's at the top or they drop off? Is there a place where we can improve, and do you guys iterate on that? Also, is there certain tools that you use? Like for example, we use Notion a lot. Also, we do this like maybe like a presentation, like a test task that we also give to people. Is that what you guys do as well in every role, or do you reserve that only a few roles? And last question is, how long does your hiring process take? Like ours right now, it's like 2 to 3 months almost, because we really want to make sure we hire the right people. But that might scare some applicants off because they go through the founders. We want to make sure the culture fit is there. And we'll talk about culture later and how do you attract people to your company. But yeah, I said a few things there. You guys pick and choose and maybe answer what you think is best.
I can, I guess, start very quickly. I am very kind of like the way I have like the systems thinking. Firstly, to start off with the pipeline, yes, there's usual kind of adages. So the way that I usually like to start is, let's say that we're creating a sprint hire for, we need like 10 software engineers at a time. So we kind of start going like, okay, 10 software engineers means, let's say we're being conservative here, 15 offers. You know, we kind of assume that 5 may not be accepted, and that's very conservative numbers usually. Then that means this many interviews at final stage, this many interviews. So you just kind of work backwards almost from the goal in terms of how many candidates you would need to generate. And that's a really good tool for like talent and the actual hiring team. So the engineer managers themselves need to get very involved. I'm constantly sending them to like Slack groups and Discord groups to just, you know, blast out the roles and things like that. So they're constantly very involved in it. And then you just kind of start working backwards from that goal and just, you know, kind of start creating like a little bit of, I basically almost create like a Kanban board and a Gantt chart to be like, you know, we're going to spend the first 2 weeks only sourcing, and then we're going to start interviewing. The other thing is, with the length of the process, that kind of feeds very well into it, is if you are doing sprint hiring, you can't really afford to have the process to be as long as you, like, I don't know, want it to be, and you're just like, oh, have a chat with this person, that person. I am very mean and strict to my hiring managers, where I actually say, let's have a look at what questions you're asking, so then we can really use the least possible time the most effectively, so then you can really peel the onion, delve a lot deeper into what you need from the person. You know, there's going to be plenty of time to get to know them as much as possible, but it's just about kind of what exactly you need. And then after that, you know, any tasks and things like that, it's like, well, is this needed? Is this necessary? Do you need to see from this person? How can we make it a bit quicker? So rather than, for example, for engineering, giving them a take-home task, we give them like a live algo challenge plus some pair coding, because they will be pair coding a lot during the actual session, during the actual work. So it's kind of like imitating the live work really that they need to be doing. And then I forgot the last question, I'll be honest, the last bit, but that's kind of the way I usually structure.
Most of it, yeah.
I can share a little, this is more of a tactical thing that I found, because one of the biggest problems I noticed is we're hiring so much and everyone's interviewing for so many different roles, and those on the interview panel might even not know context of the role or not know, right? And that's a terrible experience for the candidate, for you to show up and be like, okay, so what role is this for? So what I try to do is for each role have an interview plan where the hiring manager lists out these are the key attributes, and it's actually a meeting and everybody understands why we're hiring for this role. And it also helps us as a company know which roles we're prioritizing because it takes so much time. Back to, I think, Loni, you said the expectation should be like 50% of your time if you're a manager, maybe 25% if you're an IC of interviewing. And just having that upfront interview plan so we know how many interviews to, the least possible. The guidelines is like however many people you need to make an informed decision, that's how many should be on there. And then as far as, I really do like the case studies. I don't like to give candidates homework because everyone's very busy already and interviewing is quite time consuming. But I like to ask, I tell them, hey, in our meeting, so for example, I'm hiring a head of people operations, and I genuinely want to know people's ideas around their compensation philosophy and also their performance management. And so I'm going to ask kind of what's their ideal, how would you do it if you were starting it from scratch? So that's really the case study, so they can prepare ahead of time. But it's not like a heavy homework thing. I just want their ideas, and it's great for me too. Even if I don't end up hiring that person, I'll learn a lot more. So those case studies can be super helpful when you're interviewing.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, I feel like it's in our company, at least, the process is slightly different between which roles you're hiring for. I think customer facing is one way. I think engineering is another way. I feel like because of what Maria said as well, you hire like somewhat in sprint sometimes because you always hire like multiple developers, for example, at one time almost. Whereas like for partnerships, we're looking for like specific roles, for example, to fill in, right? I think the thing that is very common to the whole organization in that sense is that we have like a very clear structured hiring process. So from the get-go, every candidate that starts the process with us knows exactly what they're going through. So they know like the stages that they're going up, that they're going to have to go through and everything. And so everything is very clear from the beginning. We also bring a lot of different people from other parts of the organization to the interview process to make sure that we have as many people looking at a person and getting to know them, and also make that person ask questions as well to make sure that there's a fit there, right? In that sense. Depending on the roles, some of the roles that we have, we kind of keep it open at all times, like developers, account executives, for example. Those are roles that almost always keep it open on our careers page because we're always willing to hear from amazing candidates, and we're always like happy to get to know amazing people that are just looking to find a new job, for example, or making a career transition. And also because of like the market is highly competitive right now, and you probably know that, but it helps a lot that we're fully remote, but also the times of like leaving another company to join that one, headhunting process, all of that is very complicated. So it's always like keeping some of those postings open and then bring a clear, structured hiring process to that hire also helps. And this way, we just can keep some of the roles with backfilled at all times and just bring people. Having said that, it's easier said than done, right? And it's always very complicated to put this in practice, but this is kind of what we're trying to do.
That's really great, guys. And I think that brings us to the next section in terms of what are you doing to make your business attractive so that people will join you. And speaking of that, as you're seeing people come in and out of my room, at the moment I am in Tulum. We are the team gathering. So about 100 and some of us are gathering here today for the week. Basically, we do these team gatherings probably 3 to 4 times a year. In January, we were in Costa Rica. Before that, we were in Slovenia. So these are some really fun things that we offer as like that, compensation package that makes it really interesting to work for a fully remote company, but also you could be in real life with them and connect and bond during this team gathering. So yeah, pardon for the interruptions and people going in and out, but I am at a resort, so it is what it is. But yeah, I'd love to see what you guys are doing in terms of like that compensation. How is Jeeves and Oyster and Hoffi making it attractive for people to join your teams? What are some cool things that you're offering? Is it flexibility that they can work from anywhere? Is it a certain stipend that you're giving? What are those things that you guys are doing that people are like, yes, I want to work for Oyster. This is great.
Well, I can start on that one if that's okay. So I guess like the biggest thing that that we do at Oyster is that we make sure it's a great workplace for everyone to work. Because if that happens, then we have 400 or 500 evangelists for Oyster just at all times, just bringing amazing people and tapping into each other's networks. I think the other day we were sharing that I think like around 30% of our hires or something like that are referred by our colleagues. And so that means that a lot of people are coming from existing networks and friends and former work colleagues, right? And so I feel like if we make this a great place to work, then a lot of more people are gonna want to be working there because people can get really vocal about it, right? And so I think that's like the number one tip. Obviously, there's a lot of process that maybe Katie and Maria are involved to do that. Obviously, we're location agnostic. We have a really good home office budget and a few other perks as well. But I feel like if we make it a great place to work at, then people will just come.
I can share. My focus is really on, it's not too different from you, Bruno, is just really great managers, because I think people join for the company and also the manager, and they leave because of the manager. You might leave an awesome company if you have a bad manager. So that's really where I'm trying to focus. And managing is so difficult and it's not common sense always. So that's an area that I'm really spending time. And also it doesn't help. Yeah, Jeeves is remote. I think people are loving the flexibility. And if you want to come into an office, like I'm in an office today, there's just that flexibility. And I think people's work-life balance, you know, I have 2 young kids and I now have dinner with them every night. I can go to their baseball games. So for me, it's been really life-changing. So that's just a huge, huge thing, because people, I think COVID really changed the work-life whole predicament for everyone.
Yeah, and from my side as well, so yes, there are of course a couple of perks. You know, we do get like a Hoffi office space that you can actually create for yourself. We do have those budgets. We do focus a lot on things like development as well. So we do actually have like a small development stipend that we're looking to kind of expand at the moment on what exactly, you know, how we can help people out. But I think definitely giving a glimpse, like I'm one a big fan of giving a glimpse during, you know, be it interviewing, be it through social media, actually giving a glimpse of what it is like in the day of this person, day of that person, encouraging your teams to create content. So I'm going to be knocking down on the door of, you know, the sales team, the marketing team, and the development team, for example, to be like, okay, let's start creating some content, put a bit more out on our own blogs, on social media, or maybe even create like a separate space. There's a lot of you know, there's a lot of tools out there. And then the final thing is, again, as you're of course talking to people, you know, giving them a glimpse of what you're doing, even if it is fully remote. And a lot of people want to try it out. A lot of people want to see how it is. A lot of people maybe buy into your mission, but they're a bit unsure about like how do you still keep connected with people. So one of the things is, Lona, as you said, events and, you know, helping people see each other. Another thing is definitely through tools. So we have a lot of, you know, we have a lot of like every Friday we have some quizzes, things like that. People can join in. We try to make it at a, you know, certain quizzes at a time as we're growing, you know, kind of more in the US, and of course on the other side of the world, we have some events in the morning, some events in the evening. So it just kind of creates that inclusion there. I created a Discord server for all of us. So if somebody doesn't necessarily want to dial into a video call, they can just dial into an audio, just exist there, work on their own thing, but chat with somebody else from a completely different team and get to know each other. So it's more of a kind of like imitating that, sitting next to one person through technology. I haven't bought into the metaverse yet, I'll be honest. I am still very much on my Discord servers, but we'll see how that goes as well.
Very cool. Bruno, did you have something to add?
No, I think that's what Marie is doing is a lot of what we're doing at Oyster as well. We try to do a lot of, like, we have meditation sessions that are programmed like for lunch hours in kind of the US, Europe, and the rest of the world. We also have like mental health apps and a stipend to spend on that, among other things. And so quizzes as well, games is always fun. We also have like the Donut app and Slack to do like random coffee chats with people from the organization, and that works wonders. Like, I meet different people from the company now at all time, and it's quite nice to make friends that way, and then be able to meet them in person, which I already did as well. So I think that's quite important.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, we also do that as well. And we have this once a month lunch you can expense with a coworker. And then by the end of the year, we want to make it happen where we buy a castle and then we do things there where we meet as a team. That's been like our dream for quite a while. So I hope that becomes a reality at some point this year. But that would be really a cool kind of like a perk. Of course, we offer like the global health insurance. So wherever you go, you're covered, which is nice, and people feel taken care of. Now, I know that we're coming up to 40 after the hour, and I want to make sure we have enough time for your questions. I did see one question, but maybe there's more. So if you guys feel inclined, please do go ahead and put your questions there. Otherwise, we will kind of like continue with different topics here and then address that one question towards the end. Okay, so then moving on to the next kind of like topic, examining roles that are essential for growth. How do you guys know what roles are going to be essential for growth? This is likely kind of like a long discussion, but what leadership roles do you see would be important for growth and you plan for them? Maybe you guys have some insights that we can share with the audience.
I can share, but Lona, before you need to tell us more about this castle. What's going to happen at the castle?
I know, it's so fun. It's
you can't just throw that in there and then not tell us.
I know. We've been wanting to have a SafetyWing Castle where we can use it for lots of different things, but as a remote company, we want to have like a place where people can come and meet with each other. Maybe teams can work together for days. Instead of having to go into different countries, which we do, which is great, but it would be really fun if we had something like that. Then it could help in different ways, or we could share it with our customers, with our partners, like you guys. I don't know, it's fun to think about that, and a castle in Europe just sounds really interesting.
Lovely. So thanks for throwing out that great idea.
Yeah.
I love it. I think also to add that, I think Salesforce is doing something similar, right? I think they just launched the Trailblazer sort of camp. I thought of some people that I know that work there posting some pictures last week where they just built like this huge like a summer camp house, and they're gonna do like regular gatherings there and all that. So I think that's a really good strategy, Lana, and I think it's quite exciting. And as soon as you have it, I'm gonna make sure to make myself invited to that castle for sure.
I know, right? That's awesome. And Maria and everyone else on this call. It's great. Awesome. Yeah, no, thanks, guys. I think those, yeah, will be the future, making these really interesting things and giving these to our employees and contractors. I know Y Combinator, we used to have like a summer camp. That's so great, like just getting everybody together, playing different things and learning more about each other. But yeah, go ahead. I did ask a question about which key growth areas do you hire for? So
Maria, do you want to go first? If not, I can go.
Sure. From my end, usually, as I mentioned previously, the seesaw thing is always kind of making a balance between, what is your plan in terms of like, not over hiring on sales, whilst the product team, the actual people that are creating the thing that needs to be sold, are suffering and they're understaffed. So that's like one thing that you need to be mindful of. The other thing that I actually really like doing myself is, yes, I have a team and everything else, but I still love speaking to just people. And I encourage, regardless of whether people are hiring or not, to spend at least about like 5–10% of their week just going out there, connecting with other people within their own sphere and just seeing what is the new thing out there. So I remember, I've been in recruitment this long, that I remember when sales enablement was first becoming a thing. That was like the brand new role out there. So, how do you find that out? Well, you go and speak to some people that maybe have moved from sales operations, just the operations part, to the full sales enablement strategy and how that worked out, and maybe seeing kind of what roles are out there for you. So unfortunately, the answer is probably a little bit more research rather than some people expected, but having some basic building blocks of like, okay, how do you sell it? How do you enable sales, with marketing, whether it be operations, marketing, whatever? How do you build the product? And those are kind of the 3 building blocks, but anything around it and within it, you have to be mindful of, as I said, the seesaw. The other thing that I've seen very often happen at startups is people tend to hourglass a lot in terms of hiring a very, very senior person to manage very, very junior operational people and thinking that, oh yeah, but then we've hired a senior person so they can absolutely do both the operational and the strategic side. But very often you need, like, you know, you will very soon starting to need that sort of middle layer, which again, a lot of companies maybe are not exactly keen on, but they have their space, because once you start getting a very senior person having to manage 20 very junior people, it's becoming a lot more like they're basically being pulled down into the granular in the day-to-day. So that's like another pitfall that I usually ask people, are we falling into that?
That's actually a really good point, Maria, because I don't think anyone can successfully manage more than 10 people. And that's not to discredit anyone if you're managing more than 10 people, but maybe it's not going well. Because think of the one-on-one, like managers should be meeting every single week, at least for 30 minutes with every single direct report. I really like to give, especially at startups, I really like to give people a big scope. Not so far that they're not going to be successful, but I think people can really stretch, and in larger companies, that's usually not an option, right? Larger companies, you're in quite a box. And I do think people do really well. They're just more engaged, more excited if it's just a tiny bit stretch for them and it's a really, really big scope. And if possible, I love what you mentioned about the hourglass, because that's definitely a thing. But if you are able to hire the leader first and let them hire their own team, that's actually going to scale much better than if you have one person trying to hire every single IC role. That doesn't scale as well. And then leaders probably know more better, if you're closer to it, of what they actually need. And in general, I would just hire less people. Like the less people, the better. Give people big scopes and their engagement will go up. But, you know, there's a fine balance because you don't want to overwhelm everyone. And those are my thoughts.
Bruno, did you have something? Or?
No, I think like it's really hard to think about this, to be honest. It's very complicated. I'm very much on the partnerships, at least based on my experiences. Whenever we find a great person, we just try to get them, to be fair, because the market is so competitive and all that. When you find someone that you feel like you would be a good fit, you kind of want to hire that person and figure out the role. And I think that is a strategy that's worked well for us. And you know, for us, when we do the hiring process, we have this saying, which is, if it's not a clear yes, then it's a clear no. And sometimes you're just talking to someone and you see, well, this person completely fits the company. Even if we don't have a role right now, that person will definitely figure it out. And last year, I did the first partnerships for the first 7 months all by myself. And then we were working with a consultant, Jess, who's amazing. And she's now our interim head of partnerships. And she's now with us at full time. And so it was very clear when she joined, she was like, this person needs to join full time. And so I just ended up spending the next 5 months just like, hey, you need to join. We'll figure out a role for you later. And now she's with us, and that's how it happened with a few hires as well. And so I think that is really important for us to just go after the right people and then figure out the role if there isn't one.
That's cool. Yeah, what's been interesting with us is these entrepreneurship kind of like roles, where I'm a founder and Sander, one of the co-founders and CEO, he found me through the YC network. And basically, founders or entrepreneurs are good at building things from 0 to 1. And when you are scaling quickly, you're also building these teams from 0 to 1. Like Katie said, like have the leader hire their own team. So that was really successful for me, being able to go from 0 people to 14 in like 9 months. And then we had someone else take over the team, and now they're continuing to grow that team. But it's been great in terms of like pretty much everyone stayed on board, and also that team is continuing to grow with no problems, even though it was hired by a previous leader and then someone else took over. But it's really interesting to have these entrepreneurship types or promote that entrepreneurial type of way in your company, so that they are able to build things, teams, products from 0 to 1 and scale them, quickly. Cool. So then we have 2 questions that, we have a lot of questions. Okay. So Charles, do you want to read maybe one or two of them? Maybe there's a theme here. But yeah, for a while there were just 2 questions, and now there's like more, a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can start here. I'm going to start with this third one down here. It's for Katie. What was the other resource that you gave about compensation? One was option impact, and what was the other one?
Yeah, so yeah, option impact is actually free if you submit your data, so it's fantastic for startups, but it doesn't have the full robust global data. The other is Radford, which is extremely expensive. But that really, in my opinion, I've seen a few, and different industries, like I think different industries have others, but Radford really can work in any industry, and it's very good, especially for tech companies, but that's where you're going to get the faint company data as well. So you can buy it, you can buy it per role, you can buy it per country, because again, it's extremely expensive. But I do think if you're using that, you have full confidence that you know what's happening in the market. But you also have to participate as a company. You have to submit your compensation data, but pretty much all the surveys, all the companies are that way. But yeah, that's what I would recommend, Radford.
Cool. And so that actually kind of leads into one other question I had here from our audience. I think that helps answer it. But what other resources do you use to help with researching compensation for multiple countries? Where do you start with this? Is there any other resources or tools that you would recommend in terms of trying to figure out trying to figure out compensation for different geographic locations?
In general, there are, I would say, some like easy, accessible, free will probably be, again, even something like Glassdoor. Occasionally I have verified against certain markets, and a lot of times it does average out to be around about the right level for the local market. Usually there is, of course, an expectation if you are a foreign company hiring into a local market to pay a bit higher, but that's something that you'll have to deal with on a candidate by candidate basis. Then later on, again, going into slightly free, but probably a little bit more limited, there is PayScale, and then going into the sort of paid, kind of like the paid options out there, which are, again, probably a lot more expensive, as I said, as Katie said, sorry. But yeah, like starting from something like this. And then the other thing I would say is definitely making sure that you always keep in mind, like, in general, sometimes just walking a candidate through, like, hey, listen, like, here is where, here is, for example, if they're planning to relocate to a certain location, even helping them be like, okay, well, let's go through like what your cost of living is going to be. All of this stuff, as I said, like Numbeo and Expatistan are usually pretty good because they have a lot of data points that people submit for their own location. But usually that's a pretty good indicator for you to also be able to help out anybody internally for internal mobility if they're moving as well, to figure out what the compensation will be.
I can add one more option too. Thank you. That was really helpful, Maria. So Netflix had a very unique compensation philosophy. They wanted to be like the top of the market, which is not maybe right for all companies. But we actually didn't use Radford when I worked there. We got it the last year I worked. But prior to this, we did not have any compensation survey. And what we did was we relied on hiring managers asking their network. Kind of awkward. You have to like ask your friends and peers, like, hey, what are you making? What are you paying your team? However, we did get a lot of compensation data. And so we essentially gathered our own, and we would ask every candidate what are their comp expectations. And then we also had our internal data that we had already benchmarked as well. So if you're really in a pinch, and I would use these free tools, but then you also can ask people too, you have to be careful how you word it, because there's new laws in certain states in the US on how you're asking people their compensations, but there's ways around it. But I'll just throw that out as a third option. That's how Netflix did it, and it actually worked quite well. But yeah.
Okay, Katie, Question, because these tools have certain data in there, are they moving fast enough to account for the market moving so quickly? So in the past 6 months, we've seen that compensation data almost like maybe double in some cases. Do you think that these tools like quickly reflect that within weeks, or are they a bit more outdated?
No. I mean, Radford is a year behind. That's probably the biggest downfall. It's such a robust survey. They do it once a year. It's a huge, heavy lift. So I do think it's a little bit behind the market. However, some roles like maybe engineers might move. You know, I don't think every single role is going to move immensely, and that's how you can fix it too with the comp review. If you're doing once a year, that's where you can make adjustments for people. And usually you're given a range. So if, you know, it's usually, I found it to be right in the range, but that is the downside if it's not like last week's comp data.
That's a good point.
Yeah, usually user submitted platforms are probably a little bit more current. And that's why it's a kind of a good place to start to average out something.
Or even like Glassdoor, just type.
Yeah,
right.
Glassdoor that's a user submitted one, because people submit their own salary, so that's probably a little bit more current, we hope.
I just wanted to add one last tool. If you're hiring in Europe and you're a startup scale up, FiguresHR. I think what they're doing is quite exciting as well. We're partnering with them as well. And they're still quite in the beginning, so they don't have a lot of markets, but given the stages of the FiguresHR.
Oh yeah, Figures. I think I heard of them. Okay.
And given that on the poll, a lot of people are like between 50 and 200 people, and they're just going to hypergrowth. I think it fits quite well with their ICP. And if it's in Europe, I think they're also a really reliable tool.
Okay, thank you. I think we have a few more questions, and maybe Charles, we have time for one more. Maybe you can pick the best one. I think there was a good one.
I thought that. Yeah, go ahead. Which one did you?
It says your pipeline for more junior roles. Let's say generally, your pipeline for more junior roles has much more volume than senior roles. Do you ever need to pause delayed junior hires to hire those senior critical ones before? Do you guys have any thoughts around that? So, like, you know, your pipeline gets filled quickly with junior roles, rather than senior. So, do you pause hiring more of the junior roles until you have all of your senior ones filled up?
It's a good problem to have. You're so popular. There's so many people lining up. I think that's great. I mean, when possible, I personally find it easier to hire the leader first, and then they can hire the ICs, because they're gonna, and they should, it's helpful. Like when I joined Jeeves, I had to run payroll. I had never run payroll in my life before, but now I learned a new skill. Are we still alive? Okay, we're here. Anyway, so I would say if you can hire the manager first, that's what I would do. If you can't, it's fine to just hire the IC. But yeah, I'm glad you have a nice problem. So many people want to work there.
I would say kind of try to balance for the junior. I'm guessing that's more for operational sort of roles. So people that are just like, you know, kind of more operational execution. So like low level, like, you know, let's say for the moment right now, we have a very, very specific example where we had to hire quite a few customer service people and customer success as well for like the escalations, but we haven't hired a leader yet because we just needed that operational. So we kind of estimated like how many people we're going to need at minimum to be able to keep up the, you know, the standard of service to our customers, and then go from there to be like, okay, let's hire these. Let's say we decided it's 4 people. Let's hire these 4 people, not overhire, and then bring in a team lead who can lead those and then grow the team further. That's kind of how I usually recommend, is to kind of try and balance it out so at least your business is not suffering whilst you're looking for the senior leader, like the minimum operational sort of number of people.
Great. There's like, yeah, 2 more questions. One quick one. What low budget recruitment software do you recommend? So someone needs some kind of recruiting software to hire developers in Nigeria, but they want it to be low budget recruitment software. Are you guys familiar with anything like that?
So when it comes to recruitment software, I'm assuming this is about applicant tracking systems, really, which I would say like for small scale of this, Team Taylor is one that is actually pretty good. We're still using it. Then Recruitee is one that's still quite modular and does have a lot of integrations with many different job boards. So that still actually is pretty good there. So yeah, I would recommend kind of those two as like more initial sort of. Then there's a third one called Pinpoint as well, which are actually quite the UI of, but they're still kind of very much in that startup phase. So those are sort of the more accessible tools. But when it comes to actually, if we're talking about specifically recruitment platforms, so Remote OK is always great. There's a lot of people there, but of course they know how great they are, so they have increased their prices quite massively. Bless them, they're making their money. But yeah, so things like a Remote OK, Remotive, things like that, they can have quite a few in terms of the job boards that you can purchase like as a one-off if you don't necessarily want to go with the LinkedIn route. And then the last bit, again, I would say just find like a Slack or a Discord group for the specific language that you are, and that is like sometimes free, basically. It's free advertisement for your roles. So we had, after we posted, for example, for our main language is Go, we posted our role on Go. Literally within 12 hours, there were 15 applications of pretty good kind of solid Go engineers, so senior Go engineers. So yeah.
Yeah, just wanted to add to that as well. Like if you're looking for like companies that are specific on vetting and hiring developers, for example, in certain regions, if you're going for like Southeast Asia and more Asia, you've got Turing. If you go for Africa, Nigeria, you've got Andela. If you go for Eastern Europe, you've got like GoGloby and Six Nomads, for example. If you go for Latin America, you can go with, I can't remember the name now, but it's a partner of ours as well. So if you go to the Oyster partners, you'll see it there. So there's a few of them that specialize in finding great talent in different locations and different regions. And so if you're looking for something like that, in this case with Nigeria, I think Andela would be a great option.
Yeah, Andela is a good one. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys. We didn't get to the last question because we're at time. I want to thank the panel and also all the attendees for giving us some great questions. We had lots of fun here with you. I hope that you're able to learn something and take something home with you. Please join us for the next webinar in a month. We'll talk about taxes, visas, and benefits. Thanks, Bruno. Thanks, Maria.
Thanks for having us. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.